Okay, up next, the University of Southern California. USC has always had a strong place in the Pando Days lineup. This year with two projects. We'll hear from one of them tomorrow. Today's presentation comes from team lead Becca Estrada, who is eco-chaplain at the university. Becca's focus, a pilgrimage along the LA River, looking for hope and motivation for climate action by drawing on contemplative spiritual practices that come to us through the time-honored tradition of the pilgrimage. Becca, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see you here, and knowing you pulled this project off, we're eager to hear all about it.
Well, thank you. Well, first off, I'd like to introduce my team. As you said, I'm the project leader and the eco chaplain. And participants include me, Laura and Lee, and I can introduce the others, Zoe Detweiler, who are also student leader of the project, and Nikki Dottar and Stefana Masters documented the project as videographers. We would like to also mention our community partners who were involved, including the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life at USC, Assignment Earth at USC, and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So as an eco chaplain, I ask questions like, what role can religion and spirituality play as we cope with the climate crisis? And this Pando project was a really great opportunity for me to ask, what forms of self-care resonate with those experiencing eco-anxiety and climate grief? So I wanted to play around with the idea of a pilgrimage, which is a journey to a sacred space that allows you to observe what's within you and around you. And so I took that idea and shifted its focus to highlight climate change. So for our interfaith pilgrimage, we went to the LA River to observe the city in new and intentional ways. And this spiritual experience created opportunities for any uncomfortable emotions to emerge, and also created space to be cared for by nature and the community of students that we gathered. Now, the goals for our pilgrimage is I wanted to allow students to experiment with various spiritual practices and share their feedback. Like I said, I wanted to introduce them to a new area of Los Angeles so they could see its infrastructure, its wildlife and vegetation, and the people that inhabit it. I wanted to encourage the students to view the city through a lens of climate change and strengthen their connection to the city of Los Angeles, as well as learning coping techniques that are important to build resilience needed for climate action. And instead of getting stuck in all of the heaviness of climate change, I wanted to make sure our pilgrimage concluded pointing towards hope and encouraging us for climate action.
So how will this help Los Angeles? We went based off of the county goals, and number 6 talks about accessible parks, beaches, recreational waters, public land, and other public spaces. And these places we know create opportunities for respite, recreation, ecological and biological diversity and discovery, as well as cultural activities and opportunities to improve mental and physical health. And so by adopting inclusive programming, which is exemplified by our interfaith pilgrimage, this can encourage people to use the parks, beaches, and other public lands to improve their own lives and to help cope with the impending issues and worries surrounding climate change.
So prior to actually going on the pilgrimage at the LA River, we experimented with different spiritual practices to decide which would be best implemented during the trip and to assess their feasibility and impact. So during our first meeting, we did meditation and altar building. After doing the practices, we reflected on the benefits and positive outcomes of these practices. So the first one was meditation, in which the aim is to transform eco-anxiety into the motivation to heal our shared environment. So through doing this, we recognize that meditation allows for a mindfulness practice that encourages a deeper connection with the present moment, leading us to recognize the impact of our own actions on the environment.
This also helps in cultivating a sense of responsibility towards the climate, nature, and planet, and not only responsibility towards ourselves. Emphasizes empathy and compassion extending from oneself to the planet and all of its inhabitants, bringing us together and fostering a sense of community and shared purposes. We also did altar building, in which we dedicate elements as symbols that represent our connection to nature. We recognize that through building an altar, this encourages a sense of reverence and respect for nature, and ultimately fostering a deeper appreciation for the environment while increasing our awareness of the issues and impact of human actions on the planet. We also had the opportunity to discuss our own feelings of hope and personal experiences on why we choose the elements we picked. So this is the altar that we built during our first meeting. We were first instructed to wander around the campus and find an element, but it can be leaves, branches. I even drew a picture that reminds me of my hometown, in which I drew a forest and me walking through there. And then we came back to the room where we did dedicate those elements in peace. And then Becca lit the candles, and can be seen we also had incense and other meaningful figures. And towards the end, the practice ends with a word of hope for the climate.
So our second spiritual practice that we did on campus involved a getting to know you exercise and then a call and response. The first exercise was a raise your hand exercise, like raise your hand if you have experienced anxiety about climate change every day, or raise your hand if you or somebody you know has been displaced by climate change. This was led by Becca, and this allowed us to just quickly get to know each other a little bit and understand where everybody in the exercise was coming from and their experiences. It also served as a jumping off point for conversations like, oh, I'd really love to hear more about that experience, or that was such an interesting question. Let's talk about it. And then the second half was this call and response that allowed us to kind of hold community as part of the practice. It was obviously the reinterpretation of a religious tradition for eco-anxiety. And yeah, it was just a wonderful way to hold space. This is an example of what that practice was. Becca, our leader, read the left-hand side, and then together we shared this motif of we journey together.
So for our last practice, we wanted to discuss our connection with water and how climate change has affected that and will continue to in the future. And so this started off with a group discussion talking about favorite memories or stories involving bodies of water, how water connects us to our communities, and what changes we've seen in those communities and regions in our lifetimes or in recent years. And this was just to help us connect to one another and get to know our experiences with water. And then we learned some climate change facts about water scarcity, increased risk for flooding, droughts, and other water-related hazards. And we then topped it off by doing a ritual where we would scoop a handful of water out of a bowl and let it trickle between the fingers. And we would recite, "My tears are for blank." And, you know, the participant can fill out that sentence however feels fit for them to kind of let go of those negative emotions. And then we would close it out by speaking blessings or words of hope, as we would use that water to then give to the plants around us and giving that back to the earth in a hopeful way to end that ceremony and utilize the water to help plants grow and give back to the earth.
So why the Los Angeles River? We chose the river because we recognize that though the river is one of the nation's largest infrastructure projects, it's 51 miles long, it still remains largely unknown to residents, including I'm a native Angelino and I hadn't been there for most of my life. The river is also kind of the nexus of, you know, being reimagined and reimagining a better future in Los Angeles. So we thought it would be a good place to imagine a better world while along its banks. It also is obviously the intersection of kind of natural versus non-natural. So this is a map of what we did on our pilgrimage. I'm going to walk through just a couple of steps that we had. Our first stop was, we started at the Red Car River Park in Atwater Village. Here we did just introductions and then the raise your hand practice that I spoke about earlier. And then the first half of the walk was on the North River Path. Here we had paired discussion questions where we discussed our own journeys up until that point about climate change, nature, these feelings of anxiety, that sort of thing. And then at the bridge at Fletcher Drive, we had the turning point in the pilgrimage where we quite literally turned around. Kind of at this area, we had our second stop, which was at the LA River Bicycle Park, which is just a little pocket park. Here we had a guided meditation led by Becca while we sat in a circle around some rocks. And then the second half of the walk was on the South River Path. This was really focused on kind of exploring what surrounds us. Here we walked in silent contemplation and then kept an eye out for objects around the river that reminded us of something we wanted to bring back up at our final stop, which was at the Sunnybrook River Park. Here we had our final discussion. It's a beautiful park. It was the perfect location. We sat in a circle as well. And we participated, we did our altar building exercise as well, using these objects that we'd gathered on our walk, and also spoke words of hope over the river and pointed towards hope.
So to talk briefly about our decision-making process, I personally have never been to the LA River, although I study at USC. So this allows for direct observation of the LA River, reflecting and connecting with nature. I think it is such a great opportunity to have this platform to build connection with like-minded fellows who were participants of the LA pilgrimage who care about climate change. We got the opportunity to share real stories, our personal experiences and journey. Like during the one-on-one walk in pairs, I got the chance to share about my perspective as a public health student, like how climate change impact me not only in the US, but also while I was in Indonesia, because I grew up in Indonesia. And also sharing about how climate change will affect our health, like allergies, NCDs, non-communicable diseases, now and in the future. So yeah, it's just very important that we can reflect on how climate change can shift everything from water patterns to environmental losses that will impact our life in a lot of factors. This also serves as the opportunity to highlight climate change that is happening now. Climate action is happening, and we don't talk about it enough. Like at school, it can be a controversy, and people have different perspectives on climate change. And overall, thinking of our actions that can be done, be it through mindfulness practices, raising awareness, and or impacting education on a personal level, individual level, or higher levels.
So here's a video of what we did.
I think the biggest thing for me growing up in LA is just that for a long time I just wasn't aware of what kind of our natural habitat was. Like I wasn't aware of native plants. I couldn't name any of them, which I think is the case for a lot of people, not just in LA, but like all over. But once I started learning a little bit about native plants, which is really because my brother got into them, and then we'd be walking around and be like, this is, it's like, oh, okay, this is buckwheat, etc. It kind of opens your eyes to the whole like world that's out there, and you can learn things just about like the landform based on the plants growing there, and it speaks to how like the Chumash and Tonga used the plants and still do. And yeah, it just makes you much more aware of what's going on in the world around you. And also like how few native plants there are within the city itself. More likely you're just walking around and seeing eucalyptus trees and bird of paradise or something.
It's nice to see the river, although I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't have that much water. I mean, I've heard about it, but to finally see it by myself with my own eyes is kind of unfortunate, because rivers are supposed to be like a collection of water. So yeah, I learned a lot today.
I haven't like necessarily had a community to discuss these things other than just like my friends and family, but I think it's something we're going to need more of as things get worse and worse, or more apparent. And yeah, so I think I've enjoyed that element. I think the interfaith element is interesting because maybe a lot of people don't necessarily think of faith, and I mean that in a very broad sense, not necessarily going to church, but just like thinking of higher powers as something that actually can kind of give comfort in these times and with these kinds of thoughts. In a sort of more abstract sense than we've maybe traditionally thought about.
Just having places like this where people can kind of come together is vital, and I wish we had more of them, but we have some, and let's use them. And I'll hopefully be back, and I'll walk along this probably at other points and just like feel different emotions, and I think that's just totally part of the process.
So we were lucky to get a lot of feedback in this process, and kind of the common thread was that students were really interested to hear the experiences from others and get that sense of community from a diverse group of their peers.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of our interfaith pilgrimage, and this is a great team of students to work with. And we have high hopes that this pilgrimage could be modified and used for either new audiences or new locations, whether it's a different faith community, a high school. Through Pando Days, I also learned about the youth commissioners of the LA County. This could be a great bonding experience for them as they begin this position to learn more about the city that they're serving. One of our students also suggested that we could not only create it for other prominent areas in Los Angeles, but we could find a way to adjust and make it to where you could have a pilgrimage in your own neighborhood. So we would be happy to, continue adapting this to new formats where we could share it either via a paper pamphlet or even a podcast, so that people could listen to the meditations wherever they are doing their pilgrimage. So thank you so much, Pando. If you have any questions, we would be happy to hear them.
Wow. Becca and team, thank you all so much. I've often thought that if you really want to know a place, you've got to walk it. And if you really want to create a more sustainable Southland, you've got to walk into the nooks and crannies of the place that you want to sustain. And that you all have demonstrated that just an absolutely wonderful and beautiful way. Let's bring our experts back for the next 15 minutes of Q&A. Ed, do you want to start off?
I would be honored to start off. Gosh, team, that was amazing. It was so inspiring and so transformative. And I'm a member of the board of Pando Populus, and I always feel like I'm on the cutting edge and the growing edge by being attached to this 501c3. Even more so this afternoon, I've never met an eco chaplain in my life, and it's wonderful to do that. I've been a priest for 50 years in the Episcopal Church, and I know liturgy, I know ritual, I know spirituality, and I really do care about peace, justice, and climate care. Creation care. And you all have just integrated it all. So kudos to you all. I did just want to specify some of the facets that truly inspired me. And I have to start with the big note that I made. I was really struck by the phrase impending sense of doom. I think that's quite lyrical, quite poetic, and quite accurate. I do think that the climate crisis and the fact that we've not responded as a planetary community, we haven't responded fast enough to that, gives us a kind of an apocalyptic feeling and an impending sense of doom, which actually results in trauma and grief. And I really appreciate the fact that you all are doing something, and my heart's beating fast right now. You all are doing something that really cares about a hurting planet and a hurting human community. And those two hurts intersect in your project. And hope and education and spiritual practices also intersect here. I love the fact that you're not only teaching people about how to care for the planet more effectively, but you're also teaching people about liturgy and ritual and spiritual practices, and how that, from my perspective, is necessary for healing individual persons, and also for healing the human community, and also the healing of the community that we have with the planet. So I want to lift that up. I also love the fact that you answered my questions before I got to pose them, having to do with a pamphlet in education and scaling this project to other places, venues, but also inviting Los Angeles County to go on this pilgrimage. I come to LA now after living there for 21 years. I live in Alabama now, and I come twice a year for an extended visit. And oftentimes I do retreat work when I'm there, in addition to some other things. And I had this fantasy of taking some of the people with whom I gather and inviting them on your pilgrimage, and taking your pamphlet and maybe your eco-chaplain to go on this. And these are people who range in age from people who are in their 20s to people who are in their 80s. And I just love the attraction, the magnetism, the allure factor that's in this. I could go on and on, but my colleague Claire is going to have much more important things to say in response. So let me be quiet and make room for whatever Eugene wants to make room for next. Thank you all.
Ed, very eloquent summation of that. Claire, come on in to this. It's a
Oh, my
wonderful
goodness.
conversation.
My goodness gracious. I was very, very moved by your work, and I'll share a little bit of what I've been doing for 20 years, and you'll maybe understand why I love what you presented. But I moved here I was teaching out in Providence, where the river is very central to life. It's a beautiful restoration that runs right through downtown, and the courthouse and the RISD, Rhode Island School Design, like very vibrant. And there's a fire ritual seasonally. And then I was teaching in Cambridge, and the river also has such an important presence. And I'm from Maryland, Washington, D.C., where the rivers, I'm like, so as you said, I think it was Lauren, rivers, like you have a certain feeling, or you just take for granted this is what a river is. And I remember coming out to Los Angeles, and my nephew, who was, I think, 10 at the time, total LA kid, and he got this idea. He saw in a book somewhere that there's a river in LA, and he asked his grandfather if there was any way that he could possibly take him to that river. And he had the idea of going up to the Angeles National Forest, to where the San Gabriel River goes in Azusa. And so he got he got a fishing rod somehow, and he got some gear, and he even had like a vest. I was really touched, because this is a kid who, I hadn't seen him so concerted in his focus. Like, I need to go see this river. I want to see a fish. And they went up, and what happened next determined my next 20 years of work professionally. The river was turned off that day because our rivers are really controlled by, there's 3 beneficial uses that are deemed for the LA and San Gabriel River. They're habitat support, recreation, and potable water. But in Los Angeles, rock, paper, scissors, the beneficial use that reigns, that dominates, is potable water. So the river course is seen as an open pipe to transmit water that we buy or beg for in Colorado and Northern California and other places, and store in dams, and then transport and sell. So the balance of power between a duck family or a young human boy or girl and potable water is kind of off, let's just say. And I must say that I was so completely moved by that I decided to walk the river myself from top to bottom. And I walked with a group of Conservation Corps members, and we walked from the foothills of the Angeles all the way down through Pico Rivera, and just noted like what we were seeing. And then I looked on a map, and it said that there was a river trail on the San Gabriel River and the Rio Hondo, and I couldn't find it. I was like, what are they talking about? So as a planner and designer, I thought, well, I'm going to work in urban forestry and environmental work. And I called the county parks department, and they said, oh yeah, there's a trail there. It's on the map. And I said, have you been out here? The map was made in 1971. And they said, oh no, we haven't been out there, but it's on there. And I'm like, well, this might be an environmental justice issue or a social justice issue. If you want to climb over rusty fences and throw a bike over in order to keep going, a closed gate and a do not enter, yes, that's a trail, but in many people's minds it's not. So I think that when you said river is a collection of water, and our bodies, we're like predominantly water. And I think Ed and Pando folks know I'm a big crier. Like sometimes I think, how do we measure our life on Earth? Like, how do we know we've benefited from being here fully every day? And I might think that sometimes genuine human tears, where you're really moved to tears, that might be like how many cups over your whole entire lifetime. How much water do you produce through full feeling, full compassion, full just 100% presence of yourself and others? That might be the measure. I mean, I'm not sure. But what you all have done by outlining this beautiful, simple way of connecting people who were born here, like you said, Zoe, you're born here, but you didn't know. Like, it's introducing ourselves to ourselves. Here's the river. Or if you're from Indonesia and you're like, oh, I'm glad to be going to USC and I'd like to know where I am, thank you. And introducing, ourselves to ourselves. So I find it so incredibly powerful what you've outlined as a practice and a ritual. And I've often thought, my daughter is now an LA kid herself, and she thinks she'll die if she leaves LA because she needs the diversity. Like, she needs the 125 plus languages and all the different cultural and social and religious practices. And even if you're not literate about them explicitly, and you're not seeing these rituals unfold on a daily basis, there should certainly be a place in our culture where that is possible and where that space is held. And what you've effectively done is come together as a small group of people and just been so mindful and so caring. And I just love it. I think, in any way that you can share this very genuine experience with, as you mentioned, high school students or the youth leaders for the city. And at first I was thinking it might be nice to literally mark the one you did, in a very subtle way, like just etch on the ground or put a rock or a color, and so that other people, like a legend, you could, find it and have your brochure, but also the reassurance that the next group of people was in the same place that you have walked through. And we do work with a lot of folks who are youth ministers and often say bringing some of their inner city youth to the forest and to the river within the forest, which is completely, by the way, completely, Lauren, unchanneled. It is completely, open and free, has literally saved lives. That connection has changed the trajectory and the imagination of what could be. So I can see you doing something physical, very subtle marking. I can see you doing that brochure, that podcast, and then just really inviting more people to, I think when we've looked at our research about whether it be climate or disasters, national disasters, fire, flood, the network of people, the trust, the connection, like if there's a network of people who are used to coming together and sharing, there's a better result, no matter what we face together. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Wonderful observations, Claire and Ed, from you both. Becca and team, are there any comments that you would have here as we wind up?
I'd just like to say that at the heart of this project, I wanted to create a resource that supported people who have the courage to look at and think about climate change on a daily basis. And as much as we care for the planet, I also wanted to care for those people. We're trying to build a more resilient climate, a more natural climate. And I was hoping that I could, our team could also give back to that and also create space for nature to give back to us as well. So very grateful for this invitation to create this. It was beautiful.
Wonderful. Ed, do you have a closing thought of any sort?
I do. I don't offer it as a closing thought, but we may not want it on the record, but I'm so curious about any connection you all have made or received or felt with our Indigenous siblings relative to this project.
Great question.
So I can speak to that as one. I definitely think that could be an avenue that we really lean into. I was able to network with some of my other religious directors and colleagues and send some invitations there. But I do think this project changes based on the people that you invite into this space. And so having Native voices will definitely increase that experience. But we actually did have some more students who preferred not to be on camera. And one of them was an Indigenous student at USC. And when I shared the invitation to this pilgrimage, she was the first one to speak up and share that lament that, we as a community, have this broken relationship with nature and how she sees it. All the injustice perpetuated within her community and within her family. And so to see her just really jump at the opportunity to have this experience with her, fellow students at USC, that was a huge, the little win that made this project so worth it. And so, but I'd love to have, open that door even wider as this project goes forward, however it does.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks, Eugene. Thank you, team.
And thank you, Ed and Claire and Becca and team. We're always looking for next steps on projects. And I think with the pilgrimage, there are next steps built into it. So that's very exciting. Eager to get my pilgrimage shoes on.
Yeah.
So that's it for today. At this point in the Premier schedule, we have seen 8 of 16 projects developed
Wow.
for the 2023 Pando Days season. We're exactly halfway. We have 8 more to go. Next up, join us tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for LA Trade Tech, and then be back at 11 o'clock for a second project from USC. Both promise fascinating presentations. Thank you so much again to our expert panel, to all the Pando Days colleges and universities that have dedicated full courses, studios, or labs to help LA County meet its sustainability goals. Pando Days was conceived in collaboration with LA's Chief Sustainability Officer Task Force and is in partnership with the county's Chief Sustainability Office. Pando Days is made possible by the support of our sponsors and by generous contributions from individuals across the Southland and well beyond. Thank you for joining with us. Enjoy your day, and don't forget to be mindful of the earth beneath your feet.